for the last several weeks, and it's all being considered. And Sean Spicer came out and said, it's under advisement, basically. So the story seemed to change, although that's not really that surprising. 1 minute you're there, the next minute you're not. Until the moment you're out the door, you enjoy the confidence of the president. Of course, what is she going to go out and say? No, he doesn't enjoy the confidence of the president. Well, he's not gone yet. And I think she said what she knew at the time. But it got tricky on the Today Show. Again, I've said this before. I'm going to repeat it. And it bears repeating. Sometimes going on television is not the best idea. The people, for the most part, who will be interviewing you have one goal: to help you destroy yourself or to destroy you. That's what most of them want to do. They're not really interested in getting to the facts. They're not really interested in finding out what's going on. Most of the folks who are going to be quizzing you and prodding you are people who want to make news, and they want to make a name for themselves, and most of them don't like Trump. So you got to pick your television shows to go on very carefully. You've got to pick your battles, and then you've got to be ready for those battles. And I would do less TV in general and focus more. If I'm just talking about everybody in the West Wing, I'd do less television and more policy, less concern, less engagement one-on-one with the media on camera, and more strategic planning. That's what I would do, because it's a viper's nest. A friend of mine who works in the White House messaged me, a great appearance on Hannity last night. And I said, watch your back. It's been a long day, he said. I've been here all day, he said. And 18 hours later, still in the White House, working hard. Good. Well, that's what you wanted to do. Watch your back. Be careful. It's a viper's nest in there. You got leaks coming from everywhere. And in the end, we don't know what Mike Flynn actually said, if anything objectionable, to his Russian counterpart. But we do know that someone who didn't like Mike Flynn leaked a transcript to the New York Times. And if the transcript came from the intelligence community with the aim of not helping the administration, but the aim of getting him fired, wow, are you going to call yourself a whistleblower and ask for whistleblower protection? Then step forward. If you want whistleblower protection, then step forward. And maybe you'll get whistleblower protection. But until then, you violated your oath, you violated the law, and you should be removed from whatever position you're in. I think the government should do an investigation, the Trump administration investigation into the leaking, because this leaking is now serious. Now, I think Mike Flynn had become a distraction for the administration. There's no doubt about it. He'd become a big distraction. But let's go back to this interview on the Today Show, because I want to hear from my listeners. It's really interesting, and I said this I've said this many times, and I said it to some friends earlier this morning, that it's amazing how much common sense comes out of the country. Just people who listen to the show or email or tweet us. I mean, there's some nasty stuff. Who cares? I don't care about that. But there's a lot of common sense where people say, do the stuff you came in to do. Probably don't go on television so much. And always give people the truth. If someone tells you to go out and say something that's, either not on point, someone says go out and focus on, and it's either it's distorting the truth or not the truth, you can't go out and say it. Ever. I mean, this happens to every administration, by the way. It's not just this administration. You have to have a strong chief of staff who locks it down early. Locks it down. The following things will not happen. And if there's someone who thinks that he or she is above the chief of staff must then go to that individual or go to the president and say, hey, you hired me as your chief of staff. If you want so-and-so to be the chief of staff, no problem. Happy to step aside. But if you want me to run this executive office, I'm going to run it. And this is what I believe needs to happen. Now, you can take my advice or not, but I will not be second guessed. And I will not have my authority undermined here by someone who wants to go around me right to you to mess up the entire narrative and to get us off track. You need a chief executive, chief of staff, who can do that. Maybe Reince did do that, and we don't know that. But gosh, it doesn't seem like it so far. It seems like you got 3 chief of staffs. You got Jared, you got Kellyanne, you got Reince, and you got four chief of staff, and Bannon. 4. So who's the chief of staff? Who's running the West Wing? 4 people? But that is not. Kellyanne kept saying today it's not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't sustainable. You know what's not sustainable? 4 chiefs of staff. Excuse me. That's not sustainable. Never going to be. You need a strong chief of staff who says, you know something? This is what we're focusing on today. We're not talking about crowd sizes. We're not talking about how the media is terrible. We're not talking. This is our message today. We're doing jobs, the Rust Belt. We're going to Michigan. We have a big event planned. These 5 regulations are going to be repealed today. We're working on tax reform. These 3 initiatives are going to be embedded in the tax legislation. This is the message of today. You're going to go on this show to talk about this aspect of it. You're going to go on that show. You're going to talk to this reporter, and you're going to give them. But this is how it works. Otherwise, you have 5 messages coming out of the White House, and no one knows who's in charge. You need a strong chief of staff who can do that, who the president respects, and the president will cede authority to. Not cede, ultimate decision-making authority, but I'm talking about among all the chief players. Doesn't mean that everyone doesn't have a really positive role to play. They do. All these guys are smart people. Only one chief of staff. No, if you don't have separate fiefdoms where I have walk-in privileges, if I hear that one more time, I have walk-in privileges. Who cares? We don't care if you have walk-in privileges. We care about the fact that you're losing the narrative 3 weeks in. That's what we care about. Repeal and replace of Obamacare is nowhere in sight as far as I can tell. But we've lost a national security advisor. We've lost that. Apparently we don't have a solicitor general in place. And now we've petitioned for en banc hearing at the Ninth Circuit. So now you're going to have 11 liberal judges on the Ninth Circuit hearing your immigration case. Good luck. Here's one place a conservative never wants to be. Ninth Circuit, ever. You never want to be in the Ninth Circuit. It is a nightmare. It is filled with liberal judges. There are 29 judges on the Ninth Circuit. You want to know how ridiculous this circuit is? Idaho, Arizona, Utah, California, Washington State, Oregon. All those states are part of the Ninth Circuit. 29 judges. 11 judges would hear, if it was granted, you have to have 15 judges to grant the petition. You have 11 who would sit and hear the case again. Now, what are the chances that you're going to get a majority of those 11 judges on an en banc proceeding? That means all the judges hear it. But it's because it's so big, you don't do 29, you do 11. What are the chances that you're going to get a majority of those 11 ruling in favor of the Trump administration? Now, I don't care that one judge on the Ninth Circuit made what's called a sua sponte, a request for an en banc. That's okay. It doesn't matter that one judge, as the administration, could just say, no, we're either going to go right to the Supreme Court for immediate relief. You'll have better luck there. Or you're going to replace and repeal and replace your own executive order with something more narrowly tailored, which I would recommend. Or I guess you just try to go back and argue in front of Judge Robart in Seattle, which is a disaster. That's never going to help you. So there's just the way things are being decided is not, in my view, helpful. And you need someone in there who can right the ship. That is my view. I will tell you the truth. I will tell you my unvarnished opinion. I'm sure, I'm not going to be at the top of the list of the next social event at the White House because I'm saying what I'm saying. Now ask me if I care. I didn't care when I took on the Bush administration in the second term. When I stopped getting invited to the White House, guess what? You know what I kept? I kept my integrity. And I kept my principles. Doesn't mean I'm perfect or don't make mistakes, but I stand by the issues that this president won on and ran on. And I stand on the idea of American sovereignty and an efficient running of the executive branch, where mistakes will always be made, but when they are, you quickly learn from them and right that ship. The Today Show was not the place to try to make the case for the Trump administration.
Kellyanne,
General Flynn.
That makes no sense. Last month, the Justice Department warned the White House that General Flynn had misled them, and that as a result, he was vulnerable to blackmail. And at that moment, he still had the complete trust of the president?
Matt, I'm telling you what the president has said, which is that he's accepted General Flynn's resignation, and he wishes him well, and that we're moving on.
Again, I always think of what's the purpose of going on the Today Show? What was advanced? And I'm not blaming Kellyanne for this. She's trying to do her best in a very difficult situation. But what's the point? What is advanced by going on and talking and getting beaten up by Matt Lauer?
I want to go back to that phone call with the Russian ambassador back in December. You're starting to make me think that perhaps General Flynn, that he wasn't freelancing during that call, that in fact he may have been making that call on behalf of the administration or the incoming administration. Would that be accurate?
No, it would be a mistake to conclude that. Remember, in the end, it was misleading the vice president that made the situation unsustainable.
Which the White House knew about last month. And yet yesterday you went on the air and said that General Flynn had the complete and full confidence of the president.
And General Flynn decided that he should resign last night, and the president accepted that resignation.
Well, again, what you want to be on television talking about is growing the economy, enforcing the rule of law, and advancing the administration's mandate to, I think, increase the public's belief that government can actually work. I mean, you want to increase and advance your agenda and ensure that the public, at least a majority of the public, believes at any given time that you're on their side, which is why Trump won. Trump won because of that narrative. 855-40-LAURA. We're going to take a break. We'll get to all your calls. I like General Flynn. I don't trust this story about the call and the transcript that no one's seen. To me, this all seems too convenient. Wow, the word setup comes to mind. Neoconservatives want their guy in that National Security Council. They want their guy. They never liked Flynn. Flynn is much more aligned with Trump on foreign policy than he is with the Weekly Standard crowd. So when a good person is taken down in the Washingtonian fashion as Flynn was, at least my spidey antenna are up. I don't know all the facts of what exactly was said, but my spidey antenna is up. Why does an incoming national security advisor not have the right to be on the phone with his counterparts in other countries? Do you not have that right? I mean, I don't understand why that in and of itself is a violation of any, and the Logan Act has never been used to prosecute anyone. Does that mean if I went and I saw some Russian ambassador at a party and I said, you guys have the wrong policy on this and I believe that this policy should be changed, am I in violation of the Logan Act? I mean, it is. This is why nobody's been prosecuted under it. 855-40-LAURA. Your reaction to this and a lot more. Rick.
Laura, honor to speak to you. I just want to make a quick point. That is, every issue that you speak about, I wish that the Trump administration would listen to you because you are right on all the time. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. That's nice of you to say. I appreciate that. Let's go to John in South Carolina, line 4. Johnny.
Hey, Laura, I echo everything that you said so far. I just wanted to add one thing, and there's no way to deny that this is going to be a huge black eye for Trump in the first 30 days. The one thing I want to come back with as someone who supported him is, Democrats and the media is very quick to point out this quick failure. But if you look back on the previous administration and quite a few of the Fast and Furious, IRS, Benghazi, no one ended up being forced to resign or resigning over those, and it led to. So I just wanted to point that out.
That's a great point. They never fired anyone. The only one who got fired was Van Jones, and he ended up over at CNN, right? We have a lot more to get to. All your calls, you guys give common sense advice and also analysis, just common sense, how to run this thing better. They can figure it out. Congressman Mark Meadows is going to stop by from the Freedom Caucus.
Trouble, 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 bad dog and
You could be in trouble if identity thieves get a hold of your personal information. They start going into your accounts. Forget about it. You have to do what you can do to protect yourself, your hard-earned money, to stay out of this trouble. The identity theft in this country skyrockets around tax filing time. Last year, listen to this. No, last year and the year before, you combine them, $47 billion in fraudulent refunds that have been blocked. Okay, they tried to get these refunds, been blocked. Well, my goodness, you have got to get LifeLock on your side. If they detect your information has been tampered with, intruded upon, they alert you. But not just that. A U.S.-based agent will then work with you to fix the problem that exists now. And it's much better than the free credit monitoring. So no one can prevent all ID theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses, but LifeLock is the best of all the identity theft protections available. Memberships start at $9.99 a month plus applicable taxes. Go to LifeLock.com or call 1-800-LifeLock. 1-800-LifeLock. Use the promo code Laura. That's Laura for 10% off your LifeLock Ultimate Plus membership. Visit LifeLock.com. Remember, save 10%. Lost your national security advisor. You got your administration mucked up in all these lawsuits. By the way, the more I read about the Ninth Circuit en banc petition, the more confused I am. You now have a district court judge, female judge Brinkema down in Virginia, who's ruled against the administration, issuing a preliminary injunction against the travel ban. That might go to the Fourth Circuit. So you mucked up in the courts. You lost your national security advisor. You had the rollout with Spicer that was difficult with his initial appearances. And you have leakers. And does it make sense that officials from a previous administration can go ahead and sabotage a national security advisor for a new administration? Well, certainly that looks like exactly what happened. Well, Sally Yates is a partisan who they somehow picked as acting attorney general, which still boggles the mind. Whoever is responsible for that should be gone. You just have to be gone. That's just terrible decision making. And then you just have someone who leaked the transcript or details of a transcript to the New York Times. This is top secret information being leaked by either Clapper's people, Brennan's people, Yates and her team, an underling. I don't care who it is. Got to find out who it is. Joining us now, Mark Meadows. He's one of the good guys. North Carolina's 11th district, chair of the Freedom Caucus, and we look to him for, well, some guidance in what is stormy weather here in Washington, even though it's pretty beautiful out. He joins us now. Congressman, happy Valentine's Day. Is this a Valentine's Day massacre we're seeing in the administration, or are we going to turn it around?
Happy Valentine's Day to you, Laura, and to all your listeners. I can tell you we're not only going to turn it around, but some of this is to be expected. You know better than anybody just how really the good old boy network in Washington, D.C. is there. It's alive. It's well. And anybody that threatens to change it is going to meet with major resistance. And so I can tell you that it will get turned around. There will be more of what you would say the difficulties with a rollout, transition, and the like. The leaks probably concern me more so than anything. Mm-hmm. You're exactly spot on in talking about that. But with General Flynn's resignation, we've got General Kellogg that will be taking his place temporarily. We don't miss anything from a national security aspect, but we need to also understand that these leaks are strategic. They're trying to undermine the progress, whether it's on immigration reform, whether it's on other issues of national security implications or foreign policy. It's troubling, and I can tell you that at this point, it's all about getting good advisors and maybe listening more to Laura Ingraham on her thoughts.
Thank you. It's easy on the outside to give advice, I guess. On the inside, it's different. But what you heard this morning on some of the cable news is that what the real goal of the left here, you're right, is to give a sense of delegitimization to the Trump team. And Flynn the Flynn issue raises other questions, and Mark Halperin was on with the crowd at Morning Joe, and they were basically saying, well, what did Trump know, and when did he know it?
Almost everyone I knew thought from the day that Donald Trump named General Flynn that his days were numbered in the job for a variety of reasons, including his ties to Russia. But it does raise questions about the president's judgment and about the White House counsel who knew about this allegation that he could be blackmailed. For a month, and whether he did something about it or not. Most people I know who've had that job would have resigned had something not been done about it.
Do you sense that what's really going on here is an attempt to get to Trump? That Trump knew about this report, again, that the White House was warned on Flynn. Trump was warned about possible Russian blackmail. Again, this is all whisper campaign. We don't know exactly what this is about. But that Trump should have acted sooner. And why didn't he act sooner? Of course, what they want to put in the people's minds is that Trump has some affinity for Russia for whatever reason, and that's clouding his judgment. And I mean, what the left really wants to say is that he's unfit for office. That's where they're going with this. You got to take 4 or 5 steps forward, but that's where they're going.
Well, that is the narrative, Laura, and here's the concerning part. And you know, you had on the lead-in where you have some of your Democrats that are saying, well, gosh, he needs to be more thoughtful, and he needs to, have a better plan to roll some of these things out. And so you're getting 2 arguments. So it's interesting. Now we're having this morning, well, he should have acted quicker. And yet, just a day or so ago, he should have acted slower. I mean, there's no pleasing the left, Laura, when it comes to really making change. Now, I will say that the president is a very loyal individual. General Flynn not only is a trusted confidant, but loyalty is a big thing to the president, and you can appreciate that. At the same time, our national security, I can tell you the president is not going to allow our national security, whether it is in the role of the national security advisor or our southern border or anything in between, get in the way of protecting the American people. And so with that, it was more of a deliberate move. I think that in some of these things, the internal conversations that happened within the West Wing were really such that maybe there were some new revelations that came out just in the last few days in terms of the integrity of General Flynn. And I don't want to impugn anybody's integrity based on reports, but at the same time, I think he did the right thing by resigning.
I don't know what he did. This is, I keep saying, a friend of mine just emailed me, was Flynn destroyed by fake news? What's the new?
Well,
what did he do? I mean, he said in his letter of resignation he didn't fully describe the nature of the call with his Russian counterpart. But he didn't. They keep saying he lied. I'm not sure that he lied. I've been around this town longer than you, Congressman, and I've seen good people dragged through the mud by their opposition who wanted them out before they even stepped into office. They wanted Flynn gone because Flynn is not a neoconservative. He's not part of the neoconservative establishment, nor is Trump. And the neocons have wanted back into national security from day one. They wanted to get Flynn out so they can put their guy in. I'm sorry, but or someone in who's more amenable to the neoconservative agenda. That's what I think is under.
See it. And you have been around, and so you see it very clearly. So it's interesting that you point that out, because everything comes back to this Logan Act that they're talking about.
That no one's ever been prosecuted under.
And no one's ever been prosecuted, and actually if we had prosecuted people, it would be a lot of other people other than General Flynn for their involvement, whether it be with basketball players going to North Korea, whether it be other people actually getting involved in foreign policy without being authorized. The other component is supposedly there's this negotiation about sanctions that happened prior to January 20th. Well, we don't see any follow-through on any negotiations that he presumably had done. So even with that, to have a casual conversation without any quid pro quo issues is a non-starter. So your point's well taken. I think what we've done is we've created a crisis in the midst of a few things that may or may have been said, may or may not have been said. And so in doing that, Laura, it is critically important that the millions of Americans who support Donald Trump, that they don't lose
faith in him.
Heart.
Faith in him or faith in the agenda. But before we leave this topic and go on to Obamacare, which is what we should be focusing on, should there be a congressional or executive branch investigation, maybe a special counsel, to investigate the leak of this transcript, the nature of its contents, to the New York Times? Because this is a national security matter. Should there be an investigation? Would you support one?
Well, I support going after anyone within that circle that is leaking sensitive information to the press. And what you're getting is it's leaking like a sieve over and over again. Some of those are people searching for power, some of those that are trying to undermine the president's agenda. But all of that being said, it's critically important that we stop that immediately and that we start to look at. I understand the administration is looking at that, but it's not, it's not something that a congressional hearing would do. It is something that you truly have to figure out what's happening within the executive branch and hopefully hold people accountable.
Yeah, well, Yates, the Deputy Attorney General in December, then became the Acting Attorney General. She's a partisan. Yates, everyone I know who's worked in the Justice Department, who's worked with her, said, look, she's a smart person, but she's a partisan. And they were laughing at Trump all in the halls of the Justice Department. Now, she's the person who ends up finding Flynn's comments, quote, highly significant and, quote, potentially illegal, according to an official familiar with her thinking. Another person in the Justice Department speaking to the Washington Post today. All I'm saying is, the decision-making in the West Wing, from who they put in as acting attorney general to how they rolled out this immigration executive order, they've got to do better. Because they made these mistakes have cost them precious time, and they've lost the narrative. Let's move to the left in this Obamacare replace and repeal and replace. Jason Chaffetz, his town hall that he had last week, Chaffetz, who was elected with 73% of the vote in Utah, said this.
In my heart of hearts, that given the choice that was before us, by far, Donald Trump was the better choice. By far.
Okay, so they interrupt him. It's a decision, and again, he's not a big fan of Trump, so we knew that during the campaign. Right, he didn't like Trump. Right. But now we have the information from Paul Sperry at the New York Post that they are organizing even in friendly town hall settings, their activists to fan out, to separate, to sit in separate parts of the town hall events, and to shout down and to attempt to humiliate Republican congressmen and senators. What are you finding in your North Carolina district, and do you have public town halls planned?
Well, we do our town halls every year in August, Laura, and then between that, when we're in session like this, we'll do either a Facebook town hall or teletown hall. So our public town halls are normally during the August recess, and we'll do multiple ones. So I have not actually had a personal town hall, nor do I plan to do one. It's interesting. We just came off of an election, November 8th, right. It was only a few months back. I had more public events in October leading up to the November 8th election, and so to somehow think that I'm going to be better informed on the issues a month or two later by holding a town hall, it really defies logic. So what we really have to do, and what I've done, is I've reached out to a lot of those people that are on the left and said, what are your concerns? And most of them are concerned about being kicked off of their insurance and pre-existing conditions. So as long as we address that on a replacement plan and actually promote personal responsibility in our health care costs and choices, I mean, most people will negotiate more over a head of lettuce at a grocery store than they do over their doctor.
Right, but where's the plan? You got to control costs, though, and it seems like everybody's running scared from Big Pharma. They don't want to touch the drug prices, which I think is really stupid.
You and I both know that I'm willing to tackle anybody if
Big Pharma at it, that's a nightmare,
even including Big Pharma. And so I can tell you that we have.
I'll help you on that.
I know you will, and you mean what you say, and I appreciate that. And so, Laura, here's the interesting thing is the Freedom Caucus, we have to get 80% of our members to support a particular plan. We're just a few votes shy of that, so we'll, breaking news with you today is that I fully expect that we'll endorse a plan that will be very similar to Dr. Rand Paul's plan. It's actually Governor Mark Sanford's plan. And as we do that, it will be a specific plan where we start to discuss the merits of the individual plan, not a bunch of concepts. And so in that plan, it really looks at allowing not only for more personal decisions and personal control over your health care decisions, but it also starts to limit the growth of the big bureaucracy here in Washington, D.C. that wants to control every health care decision.
Congressman, we're out of time, but fascinating interview. We really appreciate your joining us. We'll check back with you. This repeal and replace has got to happen sooner rather than later. We appreciate your voice very much. Stay with us. Give me your sense here. Because when they call it a raid, we're supposed to think it's all unfair. But what I think is now we actually have the law being enforced. But I said this on Fox and Friends today. Happy Valentine's Day. I said this on Fox and Friends today that we've been doing these immigration sob stories since 2006 on the show. Because I've been telling you all along, this is meant to tug at your heartstrings. But if they really were just telling these personal narratives and sharing personal experiences on the immigration front with people, they would share the experiences, both the positives and the negatives of rampant illegal immigration. The positives, well, the guy who starts the small business and pays taxes and daughter's a valedictorian and he flies the American flag. Okay. Then what about the other stories? What about the guy in Colorado Springs, arrested for the third time for DUI, runs over a mom, leaving 3 children without a mother? Where do those kids go to get their lives back, get their parent back? How do we judge this narrative if we have an American media who are constantly advocating on one side of this issue? On a scale of 1 to 10, how heartless is Donald Trump and the Immigration Customs Enforcement being here by actually focusing on those who are criminal aliens, who by law become deportable aliens, according to the immigration statute? You become a deportable alien. Well, what about their due process rights? Guess what? You decided to come into the country illegally and then commit crimes in the country. You become a deportable alien, and you should be processed as such. If you have decided to have children in the country, you had children thinking that would inoculate you from deportation. It does not, according to our law. Now, if Congress wants to decide, with all of its intellect and experience, that criminals with children in the country should be allowed to stay, then they can take that to town hall meetings across the country. Imagine that legislation. If you've committed crimes as an alien and have children, you can stay. Can you imagine that law? No, because nobody would write that law. Because that law, there would be an uproar nationwide if they tried to push that through. So what they try to do is they try to cow the enforcement officials and intimidate them from enforcing the rule of law. Because if you conduct an immigration sweep, which is what our nation had always done, going back to the 50s, immigration sweeps it's called enforcing the rule of law. You can send Jorge Ramos out on 2 or 3 television shows last night to advocate on behalf of lawbreakers. Okay, I understand that's what he does. He does it every night. He believes that you have a constitutional right to remain in the United States of America. Do you notice he doesn't really ever answer the question on who should be deported? You really press him on, okay, give me the classes of aliens who you think are deportable. They need to do that with Jorge more. I don't think Hannity did that last night either. Who is deportable? Who's deportable? Anybody? Does Canada have the right to deport people out of Canadian territory? A lot of them will, by the way, say, yes, Canada has the right to deport, but then all of a sudden the question comes back to them, the United States, and, well, we have to have a procedural due process for illegal aliens in the United States. So you have a procedural due process right to have a lawyer represent you, to have cross-examination of Border Patrol agents and custom. Really? That's what the Constitution was written to protect, the rights of people who are not American citizens, to argue the case as why they should be or why they should be allowed to stay. Gosh, I don't think that's what the Constitution was written to protect. Obama deported this was just in his first term, 409,000 people in his first term. It slowed down a little bit, especially in the last 2 years, but he kept deporting people even through his second term. But there was a lot in the first term. 75% of the immigration raid arrests under Trump have been for criminal convictions, according to DHS. In my view, Trump is doing exactly what he should be doing. And you know what else they should do? They should publicize the crimes. Back to communications at the White House. Drew, you can chime in. Drew's learned a lot about communication over the past few years. This is what I would do. Communication. If you're going to do these raids, I would roll out the 3 steps of, we're going to have the enforcement step, but before that, we're going to lay out the groundwork for why the criminal aliens are such a menacing part of the U.S. population. I would roll out more victims. I know we did it in the campaign, but that's okay. Victims of illegal immigrant crime, beyond just Kate Steinle and Jamal.
Right, because the average person, Laura, doesn't know these crimes. They don't get the full, why it's so heartening and why it's so disheartening to people and why it really hurts, the average American citizen who is here following the rules, paying taxes, doing all the right things. And when someone comes in, all you get is the sob story, the graduation person, or you get, the hardworking immigrant that all he wants to do is work, not the person who's coming across the border and
paying taxes. They're
drugs.
They're paying taxes. They're here for 20 years. They're great Americans. Well, they're not Americans, number one. Right. They violated the law. They're using false documents. And some of them, we know from past prosecutions going back to the 90s, some of them did vote. I'm not saying millions of people vote illegal, but some did. Right. And this can't stand. This cannot stand. We got a lot of people calling in. 75% of the immigration rate. So back to the communication. I would lay the groundwork factually for the problems that we have. We have 180,000 criminal aliens who have been released into the system, back into the United States, who need to be deported, who don't show up for their deportation hearings. Now, Trump said that on the campaign trail, and they tried to Pinocchio check it at the Washington Post. They do this fact check. They had to say, even I was reading back on this yesterday before I was on with Hannity, that is a true number. Yes. That's factual. 180,000 criminal aliens just released back. Now, why were they released? Well, in some cases, their home countries won't take them back. Do you think Trump doesn't have leverage over these countries that won't take back their criminals? Honduras, here's what's going to happen. You're going to take the 15 child molesters and the 4 drug pushers and the people involved in hit and runs and the people involved in armed robbery. They're all going back, and they're going to be sent to you tomorrow. If you try to send them back to our country, or you release them and we find they come back into the United States, we will hold you accountable. Our trade policy will be affected. Our security policy will be affected. All of this will be affected unless you enforce your own rule of law. You take your own people back. But you got to message this, and you got to tell the story of the victimization of the American public, because politicians on both sides of the aisle refuse to do their sacred job, which is to keep this country safe. They refuse to do it for a lot of reasons. And these crimes that were committed are horrible. Yeah, and it's rape, thank you, rape, domestic abuse. The hit and runs are rampant. Arizona, Texas, LA County, Oakland, hit and runs, multiple DUIs, but DUIs that result in serious property damage or serious damage to persons, meaning death, maiming, losing limbs. I mean, some of these, Jessica Vaughn's going to join us. She's going to tell us, explain more on this and another issue about the 72 terrorist acts that were committed, terrorist-involved acts committed by people from the 7 Trump-listed countries in that immigration ban. We're going to go one more call. John in New York. John's making my point about going on all these television shows and why we're going on so many TV shows. John, quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, everybody's tuned the media out. There's no reason to put the guy on every Sunday show. Let them have, like, some clown on there like Mark Cuban. They're going to suffer if Trump people aren't there. I don't know why he's doing this. And one second thing is, this Congress has got to get behind this guy. They got to start. I mean, they got to realize the left will do the same thing to any one of them, like Paul Ryan. These guys got to have his back. We're watching, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to run clowns like Mitt Romney, and so the establishment, either whoever wins, they got their guy in there.
The knives are out for Trump. Let's face it, the knives are out. We're going to take a break. Jessica Vaughn's going to join us. The truth about what the Washington Post claimed about her analysis of the terrorist activity since 9/11 and what countries of origin have sent terrorists into this country. Don't go away. And they didn't really cover it in the press much. But Trump does it, and suddenly Trump's the worst person ever. Also, the information about the 7 countries that were listed in Obama's temporary travel ban. The Washington Post did a fact check on a Center for Immigration Studies report where 72 terrorists, was reported, came from countries covered by the Trump vetting order since 9/11. That's what Stephen Miller did say on 2 Sunday shows on Sunday. Is that actually the case or not? Joining us now, Jessica Vaughn, for a very brief appearance to tell us why the Post is wrong. Jessica, welcome.
Thanks, Laura. And can I first say, I think the opposite of heartbreak is heartthrob.
Heartthrob, thank you. But you could have a heartthrob. Yeah, I guess you're right. Heartthrob, that's about as close as we can come for the time being. Let's hope it's not heartbreak in the West Wing here over what's happening today. KT McFarland is out. We have Michael Flynn out. But let's move to this issue of the 72 individuals from 7 countries covered in the Trump ban that have been convicted in terror cases since 9/11. The Washington Post said that that's misleading because some of them were convicted of crimes that were not directly terror crimes, but that were giving material support or other fraud cases or drug trafficking cases. What's the story?
Well, I think people can judge on their own. One of the cases that the Washington Post suggested was not a real terror case, was a guy who was dealing heroin on behalf of Hezbollah to raise money for Hezbollah's activities. I think that's clearly terror-related. Others were laundering money in the belief that it was going to go to Hezbollah, a group of guys in Rochester, New York, who were hoping that they were providing support to that terrorist organization. Others, there's a whole group of them many of whom entered as refugees originally from Iraq, were being investigated by joint terrorism task forces around the country around the time of 9/11. And then 9/11 happened, and they decided these guys had fraudulently obtained hazmat licenses.
Lovely.
Yeah, and so they decided not to wait to find out what they were going to do with those hazmat licenses and to just get them out of the country as quickly as possible and use whatever means possible. I mean, anyone who follows federal organized crime enforcement knows that you go for what you can get them on, and sometimes if you think it's urgent, you go for the easiest low-hanging fruit in terms of charges. And, you know, we don't want to give people the chance to be successful in carrying out a terrorist
Isn't it better, though, Jessica, just to say that 72 people have been convicted of a variety of crimes, including terrorism? Some was visa fraud. I mean, maybe it's just the way I'm one of your biggest fans, you know that. So we rely on you guys for all the great investigation and the work you do. But maybe it's just better to say is 72 serious crimes, including terrorism-related crimes, and ones that are, steps toward an ultimate terrorist act. Maybe just that's the way to label it or something.
Sure. Well, I think the takeaway is that there have been dozens of people from the 7 countries in Trump's vetting order that have caused problems, have been involved in terrorism in the country, and that it was absolutely preposterous for Judge Robart to say that no one has ever been arrested from these countries. Therefore, this vetting order needs to be stopped.
Also, the Fourth Circuit judge, right? Oh, the Virginia district judge also said there was no evidence in the ruling yesterday, the day before. So this continues to be pushed by these judges who are not to be sitting in judgment on national security matters. Jessica, thank you for your explanation of all this. We really appreciate it. We'll have you back soon. Thank you so much. We're going to come back. Congressman Tom McClintock is going to join us from California's 4th District. Don't go away. The nasty T-shirts that they wear. I mean, because that's a dead giveaway when they wear the dirty knit caps and the women have their big floppy skirts. And here's a clue. If you're at a town hall event for a Republican congressman, hey, here's my rule of thumb. If you're at a town hall event for a Republican congressman and the woman sitting next to you has a big floppy skirt and is wearing socks with sandals, then it's probably a good bet that she's working with the opposition and she's part of the resistance. Meet the resistance. Joining us now, an old friend, Tom McClintock, congressman from the great state of California, 4th District, and he recently had a little run-in with the lovely Tolerance set in California, who were targeting one of his events over the weekend. He joins us now. Congressman, good to talk to you. How you doing?
Just great, Laura. Thanks for having me.
So how did they organize at your event? Do you know how it actually was put together, this resistance to free speech and the sharing of ideas? What went down?
Well, essentially what your previous mention indicated. They got there early, took up all the seats. We had a venue of about 220, which normally is more than enough for a town hall. In a community like Roseville, we ended up having 1,200 people descend on the event, and again, most of them I think were conscientious citizens who were just really mad they lost the election. But there was clearly an element that came there to disrupt, and that's exactly what they did.
Well, what do you do as a congressman in the face of this? Because they're not interested in having a conversation. They're interested in intimidation, demonization, and denigration. That's what they're interested in doing, and deflection.
That's exactly what makes these times so dangerous. I mean, we have the best system ever devised in all of human civilization to resolve exactly the kind of disputes that we're having today as a society. But it only works as long as Americans are talking with each other and not shouting at each other. There was one time in our history where we stopped talking with each other. That was the election of 1860, and the parallels are rather eerie. I mean, we had rioting in the regions where the Democrats dominated. The Democrats refused to accept the legitimacy of the election itself. Their leaders pledged resistance to the new administration by any means necessary. They asserted the doctrine of nullification, this notion that any state that opposes a federal law can simply defy it. And then finally came the secession movement, which is the ultimate rejection of our Constitution and the rule of law. And what are you seeing in California right now? A formal secession movement that, according to the polls, is now supported by a third of Californians.
Well, secession to a lot of folks across the country who see California as a runaway train right now, I think a lot of the country would say, go ahead, make our day. I mean, I love California. I'm a member of the California Bar, as you know, and spent a lot of time in California, lived in San Diego. One of my most wonderful summers have been living in California. Love the state and love the people of the state, even though pretty liberal at this point. But you can't blame the rest of the country for just saying bye-bye. I mean, we'll trade with you to get some of that food from the bread basket up there. But Other than that, and the beaches, everything else, we'll come visit, but we can't deal with this. It's just a nightmare. Well, then we'll have to enforce the other borders.
When a third of a state hates our Constitution and our country so much they would back the secession movement, that's a pretty powerful warning not to let that happen across the rest of the country.
What do you recommend for your party in California? I mean, I have recommended, and it's mostly fallen on deaf ears, that despite what the left is doing, Trump, when they settle things out in the West Wing, which I hope happens soon, when things stabilize in the West Wing, I think Trump has got to expand this populist movement to unfamiliar territory and territory where there are a lot of doubters, and preach the gospel of the free market and sovereignty and patriotism and civic virtue in Oakland and Sacramento and not just Orange County, but all across that state, and in Washington State and Oregon, and expand his movement. I think that is so critical. And he'll get protests, and that's okay. I think he shows a lot of guts when he does that, and I think he should continue to do that after things stabilize in the West Wing.
Oh, yes. Well, not only that, but remember the American founders didn't call them self-evident truths for nothing. It helps to point them out to people, but when you do, they get it. And I think the example that the Trump administration is going to show, reviving our economy, securing our borders, restoring our national security, those are going to be powerful messages across the entire country, and they'll even permeate a place like California. I've got Tahoe in my district, which straddles the state line. And many years ago, when I met with a group of business people there, I asked them, well, what's it like doing business in a community that's divided between two states? And one of them immediately responded, it's very simple here in Tahoe. On the Nevada side, they ask, how can we help you? And on the California side, they ask, how can we stop you? If Donald Trump is successful in reviving our economy, and I am very confident he will be, states like California are going to be left in the dust, and I think that's going to be a very powerful message. And also, if you may note, Donald Trump did a lot better with Hispanic voters than either Romney or McCain did. That tells you,
despite the negative press, despite the near constant negativity coming out of the press, which I think you're right. That's a great point, Tom, to keep making to people.
Yeah, and that means that these truths are self-evident, and people do get it.
What about the immigration enforcement? California is, of course, an example of, in my mind, what happens when you have uncontrolled illegal immigration. You have mass sanctuary cities. You have entire neighborhoods that do not speak English, signage in Spanish. I mean, I speak Spanish, love the Spanish language, and spent a lot of time in Central America, love Central America. But we're the United States, and yet we're losing our sovereignty and our understanding of what borders mean and why we have them. And California, it's a different state than the state that I first visited back in 1985, the first time I ever went there. It's a completely different state. Politically and of course demographically, it's just a different place.
Well, and I suspect that part of the reason for the popularity of the secession movement in California is the fact that you have a large portion of the population that has no loyalty to this country whatsoever. But I tell you, I think you'll find a lot of Californians cheering the Trump administration in enforcing our immigration laws. Don't forget, it's our schools that are being completely overwhelmed by illegal immigration. It's our hospitals being completely overwhelmed. It's our jails and prisons. It's our economy. So I think that Donald Trump will find an awful lot of people cheering him on in California as he restores the rule of law and the integrity of our borders and the sovereignty of our country.
When you look at the way the government in California has operated and the dominance of the Democrat Party, you look at counties like San Bernardino, who in 1986, I believe, in a last story I just read about this, it was, I think, 55% Republican, something like that, San Bernardino in 1986. Now it's something like 33% Republican. And the major change has been the demographic change. The Democrats know that the more immigrants, both legal and illegal, that come in, the bigger their piece of the electoral pie. and it's worked out very well for them as a political matter, has it not?
Well, that's part of it. The other part is we've seen a mass exodus out of California. Our net domestic out-migration is more than 3 million since the 1980s. That means 3 million more people have moved out than have moved in. Republicans are still winning the vote in California. The problem is people are now voting with their feet. That is a serious problem. I've always believed that sooner or later people would wake up and turn things around, and they've certainly done that nationally. We've seen that in the last 4 elections, one of the most dramatic political realignments in the history of our country. We haven't seen that in California, and we've not seen much of that in states like Illinois and New York that are dominated by the Democrats. And I think one of the reasons is if your country's going to hell, you don't renounce your citizenship and move to Belize. You stay and you fight because, by God, this is your country. But if your state's going to hell, there comes a time when it's just a lot easier to move to another state. And I'm afraid that's what many Californians are doing. The only reason our population isn't collapsing is because, as you said, indigenous population growth and foreign immigration, much of that illegal.
The cost of jailing illegal immigrants, the criminals, not people who just came across the border, but actual criminals. The last time we have a real study on this was back in 2014. In the United States as a whole spent $1.87 billion incarcerating illegal immigrants. Of course, much of this pegged to California. And in 2014, Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill that reduced the maximum penalty for misdemeanor convictions from 365 days to 364 days, the report says. This has the effect of circumventing federal laws and making a non-citizen deportable if he's convicted of certain crimes. Put simply, California is doing everything it can to avoid federal deportation of non-citizen criminals. This is back in now going back 4 years.
Yeah, and California no longer even reports the legal status of their inmates, so there's no way of knowing. We do know that, Fox News a couple of years ago did a study from all of the sources.
No data. Yeah, we have no data today, right?
It's not aggregated. Correct. It's not aggregated, but they went out and tried to piece together a fairly accurate picture of what's going on. Bottom line is the illegal immigrant population is about 3.7% of the country, conservatively stated. They account for 13, almost 14% of all criminal convictions in this country, 12% of all murders.
Yeah, the data available is inconsistent because jurisdictions in states like California don't keep an accurate log of who in what prisons are illegal immigrants. And this is all very convenient, is it not, Congressman? Because then the American people are in the dark. They think what they see on CNN, that they're all people working in hotels. These are good people. Turns out it looks like about 22 or 23% at least of California's population, prison population, is illegal immigrant. At least.
Yeah, and you can go to the FBI crime statistics and you can find out precisely how many, Asian Pacific Islanders stole a car last year, but they won't tell you how many illegal aliens did.
Well, those Pacific Islanders are they're problematic for sure, Congressman. Congressman McClintock, this is what I love about you. Okay, you're operating in one of the most you are representing one of the most beautiful geographical districts of the United States of America. I mean, Tahoe has got to be one of the best gigs to be congressman, but you're in that state that's gone pretty much bonkers on most issues. But, I mean, if I'm you, I'm staying at Tahoe, because Tahoe, you can't really get any better than that. So we just need you to keep fighting for the things that are, the right things and the right issues, and take a ski run for me at Heavenly, because I haven't been back there in a long time, and you guys have too much snow there now. Now you went from a drought to too much snow.
Yes, be careful what you wish for is the lesson there. But no, California's got everything in the world going for it except for wise government. And you look at that beautiful state, most equitable climate in the hemisphere, most bountiful resources in the country. We're on the Pacific Rim in a position to dominate world trade for a century, and yet people are finding a better future out in the middle of the Nevada and Arizona and Texas deserts. No conceivable act of God could do that much damage to a beautiful state like California. But acts of government can, and they have, and people are registering that by leaving, and that's a warning to the rest of the country.
Well, God bless you. Congressman Tom McClintock, thanks so much. We'll check back with you soon. I want to go skiing in Tahoe. Oh my gosh. If you have never gone there, you have the chance to go there in the summer or the winter. One of the most beautiful places in this country is Lake Tahoe. Don't go away. I'll be on special report tonight. When we come back, your favorite love songs for Valentine's Day and why. And what song do you think would teach Donald Trump the most about the last 3 weeks? That's really getting specific. All right, we'll get to all your calls. 855-40